name is D Casanova, and welcome to a new video. I apologize for the fact that I have not made a video in quite a long time, but today it's a very special occasion because I'm going to be showing you how I make my Spider-Man costumes from scratch. Now I know what you're thinking, dude, what makes you think you can show us how to make a Spider-Man costume? Well, I have done it multiple times before, as you can see right here. Yes, I've actually made Spider-Man costumes before, and I am eminently qualified to show you how to make one, even if I am not actually a teacher. So, I'm pretty sure no matter what type of Spider-Man cosplay you're going to be doing, I'm pretty sure you could take a few tips and tricks from this video. Now, I'm going to be upfront with you guys. I'm mainly going to be focusing on the classic Spider-Man suit that Peter Parker wears, because that's the version of Spider-Man I grew up on. But don't worry, if you want to do the Miles Morales, if you want to do the Ben Reilly Spider-Man, or even Superior Spider-Man, you're not going to be completely excluded. Don't worry, you'll be able to take some hints, tips, and tricks from this video that you can apply to your own costume as well. You know, I've watched so many videos preparing myself to make this one. Oh my god. Some of the videos that I came across are just completely bonkers. I watched one video and he says that his technique is the best. I watch another video, she says that her technique is the best. I watch yet another and he says that the other two's techniques blow and that his is the best. Well, I'm gonna be upfront with you guys. I'm not prejudiced. Each technique has something you can draw from. I believe in technical equality, and you know what? You should take a look at every single technique and find which parts work for you and which parts you should consider for a backup. If one option blows, it doesn't hurt to have a plan B. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, at least you have a backup. Over the years, there have been so many, well, maybe not so many, but there have been multiple ways that Peter Parker came across his costume. According to Spider-Man: The Ultimate Guide by Tom DeFalco, at least I think it's pronounced DeFalco, Peter made his costume from old dance team uniforms that his school was throwing out, 2 one-way mirrors from the drama department prop closet, and silk screening. Yeah, that actually sounds pretty reasonable. In the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, it was a professional suit that was given to him by the Wrestling Federation, but of course when he switched to the vigilante life, he silk-screened on the web pattern and added the spider symbols. In several Spider-Man cartoons, we actually see Peter Parker sewing the costume himself. By hand. Like I typically do.
What?
In the Amazing Spider-Man films, starring Andrew Garfield, we actually see him sewing the mask, repurposing sunglasses for the mask lenses, silk-screening presumably what is the back symbol, and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Tony Stark just gives Peter Parker the costume. Yeah, no offense, but that is a cheap and flimsy cop-out. We are not doing that here.
No, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works.
Okay, so let's move on to materials. What are you gonna need for this project? Well, if you're gonna start all the way at square one, inventing the wheel, you're probably going to have to need to make the pattern. So for that, you're probably going to want some paper, some pencils, and a pencil sharpener. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now you're definitely going to need something for the soles of the boots. I'm going to be going with a pair of water shoes. You could also repurpose an old pair of sneakers or maybe a pair of flip-flops if you want. To be honest, I have never done the flip-flops method, so I have no idea how well that works. I have done the sneaker soles method, and I have done the water shoes method. Of those three, it seems that the water shoes method works the best, but that's just from my experience. If you want to do any of the other methods, that's totally fine with me. You can do what works for you. For the mask lenses, I'm going to be using a splatter screen. You could just use a white fabric mesh if you so desire, but I'm going to be using a splatter screen. You can pick this up at a grocery store for about $7, give or take. Your prices, they may vary depending on where you live. I am also going to be using some EVA crafting foam. You could do like John Hay and use Peltex, that's Peltex. I think he said that they're used for Irish dancing dresses to stiffen them and give them a certain shape. Don't quote me on that because I don't fully remember what he said in the video. Given the nature that we are working with non-sewable materials, we're also going to be needing glue. For the mask lenses and the frames, I'm going to be using Gorilla Glue. A lot of people say that hot glue is not the best thing in the world to use. I kind of agree with them because I've used it for other projects and it more often than not turned into a big white glumpy mess. But if you're a pro at using hot glue, hey, power to you. But I might end up using hot glue for the soles. And that's mainly due to my experience with the sneaker soles method. Again, it doesn't hurt to use multiple different types of glue. You can use crazy glue, you can use speed sew, fabric glue to prevent fraying if the material that you're using has a tendency to fray or tear. It does good to be prepared. Now the main fabric for this costume, well, it's the classic Peter Parker. So we're going with spandex. I have here a solid red and a navy blue. Now, it's probably going to appear black on camera here and there, and you know what? That's totally fine because red and black is also perfectly acceptable for Spider-Man. And let me show you a good example real quick. This here is my red and black Spider-Man costume shirt, and as you can see, it is still perfectly recognizable as Spider-Man, because the original Spider-Man costume was red and black. There's a great video by Sai NX that explains the theory behind comic book coloring. You can check out that video down in the description. Go ahead and check that out. Now, I believe I have the Milliskin type spandex. It's kind of shiny, but it also reacts to light in a very interesting way that is kind of comic book accurate as well. How much spandex you will need, it depends largely on your body type and how tall you are. I'm about 5'8", so I have 2 yards of the red fabric and 2 yards of the blue fabric. What? Why are you looking at me like that? I'm American, we don't have the metric system over here, okay? Some guys just can't catch a break. Once again, because this is a sewing project, you're also going to want some thread, and because it's the classic Spider-Man, I'm going with red and blue thread. You're also going to need some needles, as well as some pins. You can also use a sewing machine if you're good at those. I do have a sewing machine myself, but I almost never really use it. There will be a few times where I will make an exception because there are some areas where you need the most secure connection. It's always good to have a sewing machine just as a plan B. You may also want to use Sharpies for this project, as well as puff paint. I know in the comics Peter used silk screening for his web pattern, but if you use puff paint, it adds that extra dimension to the costume. You're also going to want to use a pair of fabric scissors, scissors for paper, as well as a rotary blade if you're going to be using a cutting mat. Now, because it's a full body costume, you're probably going to want to use a mannequin. For those of you who don't have a mannequin, you could use some pillows or some plastic bags or whatever else. But at the very least, you should go to your local craft store and pick up a mannequin head. Just to put it bluntly, mannequin heads are essential. At the very least, you should have a mannequin head. So to start off this process, I'm going to be working on the pants. As you can see here, I'm just laying out the navy blue spandex. as you can see by me testing the stretch there, it is in fact 4-way stretch spandex, which is the best type of material you want for a Spider-Man costume. And here I am laying out my fabric like this. The method I'm going to be going for on this costume is I'm going to make the pants pretty much one piece apart from the seams. Just get all those wrinkles and stuff out. Make sure everything sits nice and flat. Now, Spider-Man's pants are basically like a pair of yoga pants or athletic capris. And as you can see here, I have a pair of women's athletic capris as a reference pattern. So here I'm putting one pantlet into the other. And now I'm positioning it in a way where I can line it up with the fabric and pretty much use it as a reference. Now I pull out a marker and I start marking on the fabric where the lines are and where I need to cut. And of course I'm going to be adding a bit of extra distance so that I have enough room for seam allowance, and so that everything goes down as far as I need it to, if that makes any sense. So now that the area is marked off, we can then get to cutting. And you definitely want to make sure that your scissors are sharp enough. Otherwise, the fabric will catch on and cling to the actual scissors, and it's going to be a lot harder than it has to be. So here are the pants cut out. Now we have to pin them in place, more or less. And that's the basic idea of how you want the pants to connect, pretty much. So as you can see here, I am hand sewing the edges so that I can go over them with the sewing machine, and I know where to pin the rest of the area. And trust me, hand sewing will definitely help keep the edges in place when you do go over the areas with the sewing machine. Just trust me, it helps. And as you can see here, I am going over the area with the sewing machine. But, of course, it's not going to be 100% perfect because, well, at the time, I was not too good with it. I was pretty much a newbie with the sewing machines, so, Also, please note, this is a Kenmore sewing machine. I don't use a Brothers sewing machine like some others may use, but trust me, as long as the stitching is secure, that's all that matters. So here I show some hand-stitched edges, and where I want the sewing machine to begin, and where it has to get down to. So I pretty much have the rear side of the pants sewn together. Now we have to sew the legs closed. I'm sorry, that was very bad wording, but that is the basic idea. So, now that I have the pants of the costume all sewn together, I took off my regular pants so that I could try these on, because, well, these are spandex pants, and they have to fit right up against the skin like a glove. So, here I am trying them on, and they more or less fit. They hug my body nice and comfortably. However, with my prior experience, these kind of pants do have a tendency to slide down. So, if you're worried about that like I am, you can always do like a makeshift suspender sort of deal, and pretty much use that to help keep the pants on. And as you can see here, I'm hand sewing the suspenders on. And then I go over that with the sewing machine again. Now we move on to the shirt. And I'm using my red and black costume shirt as a reference for making half the pattern, but you don't have to do it this way, but this is what I've come to know. And you might also notice that I'm going to end up doing something a little bit differently. So the way I originally used to do it was I used to trace half of the shirt and then fold it over, and I would pretty much do the main torso and attach the sleeves on afterwards. Kind of like a jacket sort of situation. But I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to actually do a method that is kind of like the Raimi style pattern, but on the other hand, it's also more like the pattern style that Scott Bayles uses, you know, the guy from Creative Costuming. Then I cut out the section that is going to be part of the blue piece, if that makes any sense. So we have that part of the pattern, and here we are introduced to the red spandex fabric. And once again, I demonstrate that this is four-way stretch. And I keep giving thumbs up because, well, you want four-way stretch when you're making a Spider-Man costume, as I have previously mentioned. As you can see here, I have picked my placement, and now I trace around the paper pattern with a Sharpie again. And once I have that all drawn out, I pretty much cut it out. And now I cut out the blue section of the torso. And as you can see here, I've actually cut out both pieces at once. And we bring the red part back in, and it's pretty self-explanatory of what you want to do at this point. You pretty much want to pin and sew it together. And here it is sewn together. And as you can see here, I have just randomly made the back piece, or the pattern for the blue piece on the back of the shirt. And once again, I am tracing it and cutting it out. I have no idea why I did that, but I guess it was just something that I was thinking about. And right there, I have also made the top of the neck for the back of the shirt. And of course, drawing it out with more Sharpie, because apparently we haven't had enough of the Sharpie. And I do apologize for the angle. It's kind of hard to see that I'm drawing it, or it's also kind of hard to see from that distance because the Sharpie is not particularly dark enough, but the lighting is kind of crud. But with the neck pieces cut out, we can pretty much add it on to the back of the blue pieces, or the blue back pieces, excuse me. Jeez. Words, talking, voiceovers. So as you can see from this picture, I also cut out the back belt pieces. I'm also cutting out the arm pieces. So I made the sleeves pretty much curve the same way I had the shirt curve, if that makes any sense. I trace around the curve with the Sharpie again, and yeah, you can pretty much guess what happens next. I cut it out. And here I'm actually using a rotary blade instead of my scissors. And I also use a ruler to measure how much I want to take off the edges of the cuff area. My arms actually slim down when they approach my wrists. And I cut the remaining area out of the blue, and I tried to make the blue parts shape up with the rest. So anyway, there are the 5 sections of the shirt, and here it is all sewn together, and I'm giving myself a thumbs up because I'm proud of the job I just did. Okay, here we are on another day, and we're gonna get started on the boots. Now, the boots are essentially glorified socks, as John Hay put it. The first attempt at making the boots pattern, it was actually way too thin, and yeah, I kind of screwed up. I did not add enough space to the pattern, and but you still get the basic idea of what you have to do. So basically, you want to make your pattern, you know, trace around the sock, and Here we go. Here's the better footage. Yeah. This is how I should have done it to begin with. So then I darken the lines that I am 100% positive about. Then I trace around the pattern and cut the pattern out on the fabric. Now, as you can see, from this take, I cut out the tracings that were actually way too thin. But as you can see here, I'm actually sewing together the pieces that I cut out that were actually the right size. So, yeah. As I said before, I'm hand sewing the edges so that those stay in place when I'm going over them with the sewing machine. Apparently, I like to use a balance of hand sewing and sewing machine. So you can kind of see the edges that I had hand sewn there. Now I'm going to pin everything together because, well, given the nature of this type of spandex, it tends to slide around and I don't want things sliding around when I am sewing them together. It's a real pain, especially given the nature of the stretch stitch that I use. I use a straight stretch stitch, which is probably not the best to use, but it is simple and straightforward. See what I did there? I use a straight stretch stitch because it's straightforward. And here I'm actually trying it on and showing that it is just right. And apparently I cannot resist giving myself a thumbs up. Anyway, here we move on to the mask. Basically what you want to do is you want to trace around the head area, and you also want to cut a spot out so that the area between the chin and the neck is actually a bit more form-fitting. Hopefully I said that right, or at least in a way that makes sense. So I cut out the pattern right there. It's only half the pattern, but it's more or less useful this way. Anyway, pressing on. You can use this pattern in one of two ways. You can trace out both halves and then sew them together and create sort of a butt mask. Or you can line the front edge of the pattern to a folded edge of the fabric and create what is essentially half butt, half mane style mask. Main differences? Well, the seam stops at the forehead or somewhere above the nose, and then returns at the chin area and then goes down to the neck. And as you can see here, I went with the half and half method, and here I am sewing it together. I expect you guys are probably sick of the sewing machine. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure everybody would prefer to use a sewing machine, but you can use the hand stitching method, and I know this for a fact that hand stitching works because that's how I made my very first Spider-Man costume years ago.
So here I am trying on the mask, and as you can see, it fits pretty good. And I give myself another thumbs up. Let's move on to the gloves. Now the gloves are somewhat straightforward, or at least making the pattern is somewhat straightforward. You just trace around the hand, more or less. But as you can see, I did not trace around my thumb. And there's a reason for that. I like to have my thumb be a separate piece. So here I am darkening the areas, and I'm also drawing a line pretty much where the wrist line is. And I also drew the thumb to the side. And now I cut out the basic pattern for the glove. And I'm also cutting out the fingers, and I also cut out the thumb, but I do it in a certain way. So here's the glove piece, and here's the thumb piece. And as you can see, well, I pretty much folded the thumb bit over, and, well, you get the idea. So now I'm tracing around the glove pattern that I had made. So here's the palm section of the glove. And here's the knuckle section, and you'll notice that there's no thumb cut out. And there is the thumb piece. And I also cut out a section. It's a long strip, and on other types of gloves, it's called a fourchette. And the reason it's called a fourchette is because, well, the fourchette is the section that links the fingers together when they need some extra space. It's kind of hard to describe. But basically, the fourchettes are basically the bits that link the fingers together. So as you can see here, I have actually attached the thumb to the palm section of the gloves.
As you can see here, I sewed the tip of the index finger and the tip of the fourth finger, and I went down to a certain point. For the index finger side, I went down to the thumb base, and since we now have the thumb attached to the palm section, you can take the opposite end of the thumb and you can sew it to the knuckle end. And I gotta tell you, when we get to the fourchette part, that is going to take even longer. So, yeah. I am very grateful that I've spent a lot of time hand sewing many years prior. But it's times like this where I have to recommend that you do what John Hayes says when you're doing stuff like this. You're going to want to put on a movie or listen to music, or you could do what I typically do and tune into a live stream on Twitch. As a matter of fact, I have a pretty good recommendation right now. I highly suggest you check out Now in Technicolor on Twitch. She is typically a Sims streamer, but as of the time of this recording, she is currently playing Stardew Valley with Spring Sims. She is absolutely wonderful. Her community is amazing. I cannot recommend her enough. So, if you have the chance,
check out Now in Technicolor on Twitch. Thank you. So here you can see I am actually sewing the gloves together, more or less. And I'm doing it this way because I don't really trust my sewing machine when it comes to the fourchettes, and I tend to not cut out seam allowance for the gloves. So yeah, that's why I tend to prefer hand sewing the gloves together instead of using the sewing machine. But trust me, you can hand sew your gloves together if that's what you prefer. And as you can see here, I have fully attached the thumb to both the front and back. Once you finish sewing the thumb together, the stitch work should look something like this. I did cut some of the extra fabric off so that it has a bit more of a rounder shape, so it looks like a proper thumb. But that does leave the added part of the fingers, and this is where the long strip, or the fourchette, comes into play. You are going to need a very, very long line of thread to get the fourchette all sewn and into place. Once again, you're going to want to turn on a movie, listen to music, or watch a live stream on Twitch. But don't worry, with practice, patience, and perseverance, you will get this down. So trust me, it's all worth it in the end. So I've already sewed the fourchette to one side of the glove, and we have quite a bit of excess left over. So grab my scissors here, and we are going to snip that right there. Help kind of ease the glove into the split. I cut a bit of an angle so that and as long as I follow that line when I'm sewing the other half to the fourchette, we should be fine. And as an added precaution, I take my pins here and well, I typically only do one at a time, but you see this shape here, how it sort of joins up? Try to line that up with this angle over here on the other side. And as soon as I line that up, pin it into place, slide it in like that, take the finger, and I try to line this upper curve with the curve of the other side of the finger. Now, whether you do this or not, this probably isn't completely necessary, but no, I just do it because, well, I'm a bit OCD like that. Now, I mainly do this one section at a time, but you can do all 4 fingers at once if you really want to. So, just a little tidbit. So here I am wearing all 7 pieces of the costume. Yes, I am aware that one of the boots is lower than the other, but at this point I don't really care. I'm just glad to have all the sections cut out, sewn together, and yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself. And I do some ridiculous martial arts moves that I learned years ago. And more thumbs up, because I'm proud. Anyway, here's some additional details. I have the back symbol, the chest symbol, and the eye shape, more or less. I drew all these out on paper. it's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. You really don't need me to give you any advice here. The back symbol, I kinda based it off of the classic back spider design and the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. Actually, I think there's also a nod to the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon as well, so yeah. 3 Spidey costumes in 1. So here I am tracing out the back spider on a scrap piece of fabric. You probably couldn't see it all that well, but I basically trace half of it, and then I fold the fabric in half, lining the marked edges, and then I pin the fabric together so that when I cut it out, it doesn't slide around on me. Pin stuck to my scissors. That's kind of funny. So now I start to cut it out, and I'm actually cutting quite carefully on the line. So I cut the general shape out, and then I cut out the space between each of the legs, and that's basically how I make the back spider. And once you cut out the back spider, you are free to sew it on to the back of the shirt. And when I do that, though, I like to sew it on and make sure that the center is aligned with the back seam, pretty much. Onto some more additional details. I have a piece of black craft foam on which I will trace out the eye frame and the chest symbol. But right now, let's focus on the eye frame. So I basically lay the frame out on the crafting foam. I trace around both the outside and the inside, because, well, you also have to cut out the inside so that you have space for the lens part, which I will make out of a splatter screen later. Don't worry, that is going to be coming up. So here I have the eye shapes drawn out, and now I'm cutting them out. And right there I had my little method for cutting out the inside. And I tried to reserve the inside so that I can trace around it when I get to the lenses. Speaking of, here I have a splatter screen. You can get this at a dollar store pretty much. And I'm using some white acrylic paint and a brush tool of sorts. So I shook the white paint bottle, and I squeeze out a good amount of white paint, and then I use my brush tool, dip it in the paint, and I pretty much paint the splatter screen white. And I paint it white on both sides. It's probably not necessary, but it's just a little added precaution, just in case both sides are not completely coated. So while I'm not a fan of overly whitewashing stuff, this is an area where I make an exception. So here's the inside piece that I cut out of the frames. And I'm laying it on the splatter screen that I had painted white, as I stated before. And then I take a pencil and I trace around it, but not right up against the actual craft foam. I'm cutting out multiple layers because I like to have a certain degree of thickness so that I can still see out, but nobody can see in. Yeah, you can kind of see how that's going to work out. So as you can see, I cut out 3 sets of lenses, and I'm using a type of Gorilla Glue, and I'm gluing each segment on. And the type of Gorilla Glue that I wound up using, it's not the best version, but it works well enough. Anyway, let's move on to the chest spider. And just like with the iframes, I am tracing that on a piece of craft foam. That's pretty self-explanatory, and once you have it all traced out, you're free to cut it out. Now, I went with a different eye and spider design for this costume, but the ones that I am cutting out here, they're just examples to give you the basic general idea of what you want to do, more or less. You can go with your own design, you can go with a design from the comics, you can go with a design from a movie. You get the idea. And here's some pictures to give you a closer look at what we had done, and that's the process of the back spiders getting sewn on. Now, let's get to the web pattern and gluing the bits on. It's not really something I can give you advice for, but when it comes to the web pattern, you can use inspiration from many different sources. So here I am putting it onto the mannequin head that I have. And I first start by drawing out web lines with a pencil, and then I go over it with a Sharpie or two. And if you don't know what the Spider-Man web pattern is, it's basically a bunch of drag lines, and in between each drag line, there's some arches, like sticky silk lines. There, that's the best way to describe it. That's the mask all webbed out, and yeah, all that's left is to glue the eyes onto the mask. And here's a little example of attaching the eyes. You basically want to pick your placement and then glue them on. And then once the eyes are glued on, you can pretty much cut out holes so that you can see out a bit better. And please be patient. Now, the web pattern for the rest of the red parts of the costume, it's pretty much the same basic concepts as what I showed you on the mask. It's a bunch of dragline webbings and then a bunch of arches to act as the sticky silks, more or less. And here is the costume pretty much all webbed out and everything glued on, more or less. And I'm fairly happy with it. I'm sorry it took me so long to make this video and get everything pieced together, but you cannot argue with the results, especially when you use the material that actually reacts to light. I mean, just look at that. I mean, that is definitely comic book Spider-Man if I ever saw it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, comment, and consider subscribing. I don't upload too much, but it's still appreciated all the same. Anyway, I've been your host, D. Casanova, and I will see you later. Goodbye!